Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Autodesk Virtual Academy, brought to you by KETIV Technologies. I'm Nigel Mbaye, Customer Success Manager here at KETIV, and I'm joined today by Eric Paul, who's one of my, actually the one who shares the office with me.
That's right.
So it's great to have you here. I've seen you working on this, over the last couple of weeks and working on a lot of iLogic stuff. So it's really interesting, and we hope that you all enjoyed as much as I have watching him put it together over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, so today's is really going to be an introduction. This is going to be for people who really haven't touched iLogic before. Maybe they're interested in, they heard about it, but getting started with it's a little bit complicated. So this is really what that session's for.
Right. And when we're using the word iLogic, by no means is this an Apple product. Secondly, it's true. And secondly, people always think that they have to be like master coders to be able to put some of this automation together. And that's definitely not the case. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
Right. Yeah, there's actually a lot of stuff with iLogic that you can do that you really don't need a programming background for. Now, obviously, if you do have that, the stuff you can do is way more complex, but there's still quite a bit you can do without that programming knowledge. There's some snippets that Inventor has in there that you just kind of copy paste and create from that. So we'll go over some of that stuff. Let's see here. So yeah, again, it's both going to be some design automation and iLogic. They really go hand in hand. I didn't want to jump into the iLogic without first bringing up some of the more basic stuff, some of the underlying stuff of why it can be automated. If anybody saw Javier's drawings presentation a couple weeks back, that'll definitely give you some help here today as well. This whole session is going to be set up in a way that you guys can follow along wherever you're at. So please feel free to plug in that second monitor, shrink the screen, and follow along with us here. So today I'm going to start off by kind of explaining how you can design models using rule-based parameters. I'm assuming everybody in here knows how to, do a simple drawing. You can put numbers in to set your parameters, but there's actually quite a few more things you can do to make that rules driven. And I'll explain what I mean as we get started there. Now, once we get that going, I'll explain how you can create a form to directly edit parameters and run rules from that form. So a end user can just kind of pick and choose specific items, and a bunch of stuff will happen behind the scenes that you'll set up. And lastly, we'll go over how to create these iLogic rules and the different ways we can make them run, how to make them run, what options you have with that. And again, you don't need to be a programmer to get started on this. All right. So let me get started here with a very simple sketch. First, I'm going to go over some of the parameter options we have here. So what I'm going to start with, you guys should all be familiar with. You start a sketch, grab a rectangle, and you say, hey, I want this to be, say, 10 inches by 5 inches, right? And so then we have this nice little box here. Now, what you might not be familiar with is the information that's being shown here. Right now, we have it set just to see the values. As you can see, it is 10 inches by 5 inches. Let's get a little more information on that. If you make your way down to the bottom here, you can hit this third button in and notice the different names here. So we can show dimensions by value. We can show it by name. And now we've got these names here. And the third option here is by expression. An expression will show both the name and the value. And now that we know that, let's actually remake this. Because now we don't want this to be D0. We want it to be, say, side 1 and side 2. So let's start over. Let's delete that. And let's make a new rectangle. And there's a couple of different ways that we can be naming these. One of the more interesting ways is we can just start typing. We can just say, hey, it's going to be side 1, and the value for it is going to be 10. We hit tab, go to the other one, side 2, and let's say 5. And now we can see, since we have it set to expression, we have both the name of it, which is side 1, and the value, 10. Now let's say I want to make a circle in the center here. And let's plop that in here. And let's say the diameter, we want that to be something. But we want it to be directly related to this side 2. Let's say we want it to be, let's say 1/4 of the size of side 2. What we can actually do here is put in logic directly into this entry field here. We can say the new diameter here should be called DIA for diameter, and it's going to equal side 2 divided by 4. And as you can see here, it writes that all out. If I go back to value, you can see that that's 1/4 of 5. Put this back. And, now let's constrain it to the sides. So let's say we want to make sure this is always in the center. So now for this, we can say, okay, we want it to be 1/2 of side 2. So D5 will be side 2 divided by 2. And because I'm dumb, I should use side 1. We'll change that real quick. We can just double click, go back into here, edit it, side 1. Hey, that looks normal. Now we'll do the same thing from here to the bottom. This time, actually using side 2 and divide by 2. Now we can use most standard mathematical operators in here. We can do division, multiplication, exponents. So just keep that in mind. As also parenthesis, if you have some more complex mathematical formulas going on here, there is a limit to how complex it can be. But most of the stuff you'll be able to edit just straight in here. So we'll go ahead and enter. And now if I change the size of side 1, let's say I change it to 5 inches, you can see it automatically goes to 1/2. That's pretty cool. That is kind of our introduction to why we can, automate all these things. It's because it's linked in this way.
Yep. And then another big thing too, and I probably say this, I definitely say this on everything that's design automation or iLogic related, is as you're modeling your stuff, make a habit of starting to name all of your parameters. Because Eric, if you open the parameters window, which is that FX at the top,
that's next.
Yeah, and I'm sure Eric is going to go over all of this.
Yeah, take a look at this.
It starts populating everything as like D0 to D30 or whatever. And some of these iLogic snippets and iLogic code are going to use that information. And you don't want to just like arbitrarily have D0 or D1 or D2 in your code because you don't have any idea what that even means unless you memorize that D0 is always going to be top length.
Sure. So for instance here, you can see that we have this side 1 and side 2. Those were the first dimensions we added. We have the diameter. That's that circle we created. And then after that, we've got this D5 and D6. And because we don't actually care so much about, the name of it, we just need it to exist, we can just leave it as D5 and D6. But really the important ones, those sides, the diameter, those we have labeled.
Yep, and then Eric put those in there. He didn't put them in here in the parameters like window. He made those when he was doing the dimensions. And so you can do it either way too. You can like rename stuff in here.
Exactly. So let's say we wanted this to be called side 0. We can put that in here. And once we hit done, we should see that updated. Probably have to refresh. We can also change directly in here. Oops. We can change the equations. We can see, you know, that the diameter here, that's side 2 divided by 4. Let's say we want it to be by 3. Well, that's fine. We can just go in here, change that.
Yeah. And that UL stands for unit list, not like microliters or something. I know that a lot of people were really confused calling for support cases like, what's UL? And I'm like, it's unit list. And that's just a way for it to be, you know, that arbitrary integer.
Yeah. So some of the rules around naming these parameters, they can't start with a number. That's kind of the big important one. They do have to be unique, so we can't have 2 side 1s. They're case sensitive. So if we put a capital S on side 2, whenever we reference that in the future, we're going to have to make sure and use that capital. No spaces are allowed in the name or mathematical symbols. And lastly, you may run into a couple where, yes, they're unique, it meets all these other criteria, but it still says, hey, you can't use this name. Some of the names are reserved by the program, and you just can't use it.
Yeah, like mass.
Exactly.
But I don't know why you would have like a dimension parameter for mass. Who knows? But whatever. You could have it in here as a user parameter, I guess.
Yeah. So one of the other things you can do, just kind of as a relationship between how these parameters work, what you're looking at here, what you can do is as we double click that, if we click this arrow and say list parameters, we can see a list of all the parameters that have a unique name. So if I change that to side 2, that adds it in there. This can be helpful when you have either a large list or you kind of forgot what you named something and you just need to look through. This can be pretty helpful for that. Oops, that's too many. All right, because it was already that. All right, let's see here. So with this, let's continue on. Let's finish up this sketch.
And little do you know, by doing all of this stuff and having these parameters related to another, you're automating the design process.
Exactly.
Little do you know.
So we're not at iLogic yet, but we are starting to automate. And you don't even have to use iLogic to automate some of this stuff. So it's cool.
Yep. So anytime you change one of those, you know, side lengths, obviously the hole's going to update in size. Same thing if you change the side 2 dimension too, the hole's going to change diameter, which is super cool too. So just know that a bunch of these parameters are linked to each other. They're consumed by some of the other ones.
Yep. All right. We're going to go ahead and do an extrude here now. And we're going to select this that we just created. And let's say we want to make this 15 inches. All right. Easy. We're already used to that. But Nigel, we just created all these cool custom named things. Why can't I do that here?
You can.
You can. You go back to the parameters, and there's this whole section called user parameters. And these were explicit model parameters that you made as you were creating everything. In this case, once this extrusion was done, we have these available. But what's really cool that you can do is you can just create your own custom user parameter. And let's see here. Let's go ahead and add our own. And let's call this length. And it's going to give it an arbitrary number as we create it. It's going to give it 1 inch. But actually, we want it to be 15 inches. So let's go there. Actually, let's see this happen in real time. Let's make it a little smaller. We'll do 10. So we're at 10 inches. We finish up. We open up this extrusion again. And instead of 15 inches, we want to set it to that new user parameter we created, length.
Yeah, and anytime they ask you for some of these dialog boxes for like number values and stuff, you can put a parameter name in them almost every time.
Yeah, it's cool.
Whether it's angle, or length for things like extrusions or maybe fillet size, stuff like that, you can always put a parameter name in there. And I used to not do it, like when I first started learning stuff. Terrible. And it's terrible practice. Yeah, just get used to typing parameters in. It just makes it so much easier. Even if you're not automating your design now or today and you don't have plans to do it for another year or two, start modeling this way. It makes so much sense, because when you go to start automating your stuff down the road, whether it's 1 year or 6 months out, your models are already going to be built in a way that is easily translatable into the world of iLogic or VB automation, stuff like that, because you already have your parameters named. You don't want to go in here, 2 years from now, say you decide to start an automation project on this product 2 years from now, and you've got D0 to D30. You don't know what any of those mean. You have to like dissect your entire sketch, start finding out where those parameters are being used, add those names, and then start coding. So as you can skip that whole step. Yeah. You can save future you by just using names. And
you don't even have to have them created beforehand. In this case, just like before when I was saying, whatever equals, we can, if this is brand new extrusion, I could have just said length equals 10.
And then it sets that.
And it sets it straight into the model parameters.
Yep.
Let me put this back as length. And again, we can hit this arrow if we wanted list parameters, add length in there. It's already there. Cool. And there we have it. And another thing you can do that's kind of helpful as well, if we go ahead and click on the extrusion, we can actually show the dimensions as well. And this is another time it's really helpful to have those shown, because named, because now we can see, oh, okay, here's the length, here's side 1, side 2, there's that diameter. So that can be pretty helpful. If you want a little bit more or less information, you can right click, go down to dimension display. Maybe things are a little bit too busy, you just want the values. You can go back to that.
Yeah, and so before we move on, Eric, let's clarify something here for Josh. I just want to know, a little confused and unclear on the difference between model parameters and user parameters. So if you want to open the parameters dialog.
Sure. So these model parameters, these are going to be based directly on
things you draw.
Things you draw. So in your sketches, in extrusions, things that are literally directly attached to how the model is being created, those are going to be model parameters. User parameters are whatever you want them to be. They can be used. So in this case, this extrusion, if we kind of walk through this here, the length of the extrusion is actually called D7, and it's consuming this user parameter called length. And then because length has a 10-inch value, it kind of all rolls up to D7 equals 10.
Yeah, and user parameters, it's just an arbitrary value we set in there. He created that length parameter without tying it to any particular dimension in the model or any particular number in the model.
And so while we're here, in fact, let's actually set length. Let's say we always want it to be 3 times as large as side 1. We can just put that in here. Side 1 times 3.
Yeah.
And there we go.
Yeah, and you can even add like other kinds of user parameters as well. Eric can show the drop down.
Yep.
You can do Booleans. You can add text files.
Yep.
You can put a text file that says Eric equals Eric for no reason if you really wanted to. Yeah, just make a user parameter says Eric, just because. And you,
there it is.
Certainly. And then Brian, Brian Kelly, our good friend over there at Top Tier, reminds us too. Don't forget that we can store these user parameters in template files. So if there are particular parameters your company uses over and over again, maybe a particular naming convention that you guys use or certain nomenclature that you use that no one else uses, you want to make sure everyone's using those. You can put them in templates.
Yeah. So it can be really helpful, especially if you have rules that you use over and over again. You don't have to recreate them. Yep. You can just kind of have everything stored already there in templates. All right. All right, let's see here. So we did an extrusion, and let's try another feature. Let's start, let's create a hole on here, because this is where holes go usually, right?
Sure.
Let's go with yes. Let's go ahead and edit this sketch, and I'm going to dimension it to be to here. Let's say I want this to be always 1 inch out, and I always want it to be half of side 2. All right, dead center, 1 inch in. What I can do here now is I can actually go to the, oh, not the hole. I can go and pattern this. And let's select the hole. And let's select the direction. Let's go that way. And I can actually set up 2 new parameters. Let's say number of holes equals 3. And we can set up the distance in between to be based off of the length. All right, let me try a Javier trick here. There it is. Okay, so what we want is to be 1 inch in on each side. So we take this out. So it's length minus 1 minus 2. And if we want 3 holes, that means number of holes, and we want the inner size, right? So that's number of holes minus 1. Let me just write that all out. And let's use parentheses just to be safe. So it's going to be length minus 2 divided by number of holes minus 1. And it looks like I got something off in there. Let's see here. Let's see. Let's just
that shouldn't resolve, I think.
Yeah, here. Let me get it once in the parameter tab. So we have our 2 here. So it's based off of that. And now that we're here, we can see it's this rectangular pattern. And let's call this distance.
Or hole spacing or whatever.
Ooh, hole spacing.
Yeah.
I like that.
See? Oh, instead of a distance, it is a distance. Technically, it is a distance. Technically, things are all lengths. But they're terrible names.
Right?
And not because I don't like the word distance, but because distance, if I'm looking at a list of parameters, doesn't tell me anything about where it's being consumed besides it's a particular distance, maybe between 2 faces or something. So make your parameters as descriptive as possible because you want to be able to use them in the future. And the more descriptive they are, the easier it's going to be for you to find.
Mm-hmm. And it looks like I needed to have that inches nomenclature attached to the 2 because I didn't really understand what the 2 was before.
Yep, and so understand that too, and that's really interesting. I get this question a lot in support, is you can't do mathematical operations on things, specifically addition and subtraction, unless the units are the same.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see, length there, the unit type under length, and if Eric, you want to hover over that, is in inches, right? It's not unitless. And so you can't subtract a unitless number off of inches because it makes no sense. And that's why I was giving him that error.
Yep.
Number of holes, as you can see, is a unitless parameter. And so you can just arbitrarily subtract any integer from that. If you did number of holes minus 1 inch for some reason, it would like not work. So just make sure that you're multiplying the same units by same units, or subtracting the same units by same units. Obviously, if you multiply a unitless number times a united parameter, you're going to get the united parameter, right?
Mm-hmm. All right, let's go ahead and assign that. And hey, that's what we were expecting. Now let's just keep playing with this number here. Let's say it's 4 holes. Ooh, it's working. 5 holes. 10 holes. Look at all those holes. It'll go so much faster now.
Yep. And I'm sure Eric's going to get to this because I'm pretty sure Eric's going to get to this. But these parameters, right, you don't have to type them all in. You can have a list of stuff, which is super cool. And Eric's probably going to get to creating, options lists for some of these parameters as he starts getting into forms and stuff. So let's keep moving on.
Yeah. So that's actually what I'm going over next.
See, it's like I knew.
It's amazing. So this is kind of a pain. This is not an ideal way to be deciding, how many holes should there be on this. So one of the easiest ways to set this up for a user is to create a form. So let me go ahead and close this. And let's actually start taking a look at this iLogic tab. Now, some of you might not have this. And if you're using Inventor 2018, it might not be down here. Let me go ahead and close this, and let's see where we can find this to have it pop up on your screen. We'll go over to this Manage tab, and over on the right, we can see the iLogic browser. We're going to go ahead and click that, and that should pop up a window either next to your model browser or down below, depending on what your settings are. Now let me go ahead and scroll through some of these tabs, and let's get to Forms. And right now there's nothing, so I'm going to right-click and add a form. And here on the left, you can see some of the options we have for the form. Now, I'm not going to go over everything, just a couple of things here. The first thing you'll notice is that here's all the parameters we made. Side 1, side 2, diameter, number of holes, etc., etc. So what we can do, real simple, we just find number of holes, we drag it over, and we can see what it's going to look like here. That's it. Done. Now, okay, we could give it a name if we want. Let's say, hi, Nigel.
Literally anything. You have full flexibility.
Yep. You can use, in this case, you can say start with a number. You can use mathematical things. You can use exclamation point. There's lots you can do in here. So let's go ahead. Now that it's created, we'll click this Hi Nigel button. And here's the number of holes. And we can say 3. And I'm hitting tab, by the way. You can't see that, but that's what's happening. We can set it to 5. And you can see this all changing. And so far, we haven't really used any iLogic yet. Yeah, we created a form, but all of this is really just automated design. And so what I'm going to show next is how we can start incorporating this automated design into iLogic now. Now it's going to be driven off of other arbitrary rules, other user information, and start putting that together. So let me go ahead and open up another part I got ready. And let's see which version. That's the finished one. Let's use this. And I'll go ahead and close this out. Now, all of you at home still using your other model, all of this will continue to work. So feel free to just use your other model. I'm just using this one so it looks a little different, kind of tie in a little real world example. So for this customer, they have a linkage as a base model, and they always have 3 different types of base models. They have a small, medium, and large, and the small has a certain length and thickness. The medium is a little bit longer with the same thickness, and the large, even longer, more thickness, and then it adds a fillet. And what I'm going to do here is show you how we can actually make that happen on a real simple form where the user just chooses, hey, my base configuration should be small or large, and everything else happens in the background for them. So to start, I kind of think about, okay, what are we going to need to get this going? Well, we need the length as a named parameter. We're going to need that thickness as a named parameter. And at some point, we're going to have to put a fillet on here so we can turn it on and off. So if I go to my parameter, actually, let me just go to the sketch real quick. We can see what we've got. We've got this super simple little item here that was something else and is now this. And if I go to the expression, we can see, okay, we've got the length already. And you guys on the other end, you're still using that length parameter from the old model. Perfect. The extrusion, in this case, I have it called thickness on the back end. I have it called nothing on the back end. Let's call this side 1. So everybody on the other model can keep using the same terms. Okay. And now we're actually going to start creating a rule for this. Oh, I lied. There's one more thing. The last thing was there's 3 different model types that they're going to be using. So this is a perfect example for user parameters. And this is going to be using the text type because we want to say small, medium, or large. So go ahead and start a text user parameter. We're going to call it style. And now we'll start doing something a little tricky. If you right click on this equation, see we've got a few options here. In this case, we're going to use this make multi-value option. We're going to click it, and we're going to say we're going to add some new items. We want small, medium, and large. Go ahead and click add. Okay. And now you see we got this little drop down here. People will be able to choose between small, medium, and large. All right. And lastly, let's create a little fillet here. Here we are. This end, this end. Okay. But let's turn it off for now, because that's not the normal. We just want to have it available. So here we are, back to this original part. Everything else is set up. Let me go ahead and go over to the Rules tab. So we're back on iLogic. We want to go to Rules. And we're going to right-click in this empty space and click Add Rule. And let's call this Styles Change. I can't type. There we go. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this rules editor before we go any further. So the first thing we can look at here is under this model. If we click on model parameters, we can see the names of all the parameters, not just the named ones, but all of them and their values. And if we click on user parameters, we can see that user parameter we created. And if we hover over it, we can see all the options that it has inside of it. So that's kind of cool too. Over on the left, you'll see there are some snippets of code that are already set up for you. Let's say you want a message box to pop up and yell at somebody, hey, this is finished, or you need to remember to do this. If we open up this message box and we hover over, we can see what it's going to pop out into the side here. And if we double click, it'll just put it right in there, and we can see what it's expecting. It's expecting something as a message and something as a title. We can go ahead and edit this and say, hello, AVA. And title can be alert. We do a quick save and run. There it is, quick little message box. but we don't want a message box. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to right click, edit rule.
Yeah, make sure you don't double click to open it, because
yeah, double clicking doesn't open it. Just kidding, Nigel.
Oh, I'm bad. Oh, it's not that ran it. Something runs it.
No. But we don't need a message box. Let's do away with the message box. What we want to do is we want to set up rules for how this whole design is going to work. Now we've got this small, medium, and large. So that brings us to the next section that you're going to want to take a look at. It's this if, then, end if button here. So what this is going to do is kind of create the logic for you. You don't have to know it beforehand. You can just use this quick little select here. And if we push the button, it'll populate and it'll say what it's expecting. It's saying, if this expression, then something will happen, and let's end the whole thing. This if, end if, those are kind of bookends. So in my case, I want to say if style, let me delete this. If style, I can just double click and it pops it in, is a certain value. In this case, let's start with small. Oh, let me mouse off that. And an important note, if we're using a text value, let me just save this real quick. Let me show you this parameter. The style was a text type. For text, we need to put things in quotes for them to actually understand. Numbers can be just typed out, but text needs to be within quotes. Let me go back here. Okay, so we have this super basic logic happening saying if style is small, then something should happen. There's nothing in it right now, and then finish. So what we actually want to change is the length, the overall length of this object. So let's go to the model parameters. We can find length. Okay, we'll double click length, bring it in, and we'll say we want the length to equal 4. And note that it's not in quotes, it's just the number, because this is a number type parameter. We also want the thickness of this object. In this case, we called that side 1, so you guys can keep following along. Double click that. And let's say we want it to be 0.25 inches. Oops, forgot the equal sign. And lastly, remember we created this fillet over here. Well, how do we do that? We look at the snippets here. iLogic already has pre-populated some options with that. So since the fillet is a feature, we're going to go to the feature snippets. And let's see here. What's the most relevant one? It's is active. Is the fillet active? In this case, you know, when you're usually using it, it's the suppressed or unsuppressed as the words you're used to there. In this case, we're going to want to say is active. So again, we just double click, and now we can see what's expecting. So feature.isActive, and now it's expecting a feature name. Okay, so in our case, hopefully you guys can read this. It's called fillet1. We can see the name of it here. So I'll go ahead and add in fillet1. Chances are that's the name for you guys as well, but do make sure you're putting in here whatever the name that you have. So feature is active, fillet1. So now it's saying, you know, what should we do about this feature? In this case, for the small type, we're going to say, no, we don't want it. And so this is going to use our third data type here, which is called Boolean, which is a yes, no, true, false. And in this case, it is actually false. That's the official way to deal with that. And now we have this super basic, okay, if it's small, do these things. Now, we have a few others to do too, right? We've got the medium, we've got the large. So let's just cheat a little bit. Let's copy and paste. It's my favorite part. What I'm actually going to do here is explain one more thing before we copy paste. So we have this if and end if as bookends, and we need to add in a few more things before the bookend here, right? So we want to go down and hit this arrow, and this is the beginning, and then there's this else if. If you just kind of think about it grammatically, if you were speaking it out loud, kind of makes sense. If it's small, do this. Else, if it's medium, do that. So what we're going to do is click on the else if, and we're just going to do a nice copy here. We're going to say, let's copy all this. We're going to paste it in here. I'm going to actually hit tab here so it's nice and readable. And the length now, let's say that's 6 inches. And maybe that's the only thing we change. And we still need to set up this expression. So again, we'll copy from here. We'll paste it in here. And instead of saying style small, we'll say style is medium. Perfect. All right, last one, large. We're going to take this whole thing because we want another else if. The if is only for the beginning, and you can use else ifs for inside. Now, there's a few other options too, but I'm not going to get into it. And that's this time, we'll leave that for a later one with actual programming. So small, medium. Now let's do large. We'll make the length 8 inches. The side is now going to be 0.5 instead of 0.25. And now we're going to turn the fillet on. So instead of false, we're going to say true. All right, let's hit save and see if I screwed anything up. No, it looks good to me. Go ahead and close this. And the next part is, well, how are we going to run this? Well, we can go back to the forms. And what we're going to want to do is add a form. And let's call this style change. And what we're going to want to do is check out the parameters over here. We want to decide on this user parameter we made. We want to select the style. So we drag it over, and we can see over on the side what it's going to look like. Perfect. That's what we're looking for. Go ahead and click OK. Open up the form. And now, let me zoom out a little bit. As we start selecting the different sizes, you can see the changes being made. So here we've got the large, we've got those fillets, it's thicker, it's longer. We go back to the medium, to the small, and you can see it's suppressed now. Look at you, you're doing iLogic. One last thing to note. Do make sure when you're on the rule, let me edit the rule here. One thing to check on is on this options tab. If you want this to run whenever the parameters are changed, you leave this unchecked, this suppress rule. If you suppress the rule, when parameters change, this rule won't run. But if you leave it unchecked like it is now, anytime those parameters are changed, then it'll run. So that can be helpful. Sometimes, let's say for that pattern one we were doing last time, maybe we put 50, 60, 100 different holes. It's like, hey, we don't want it to happen every time we change it. We just want it to fire off at the end. We click that suppress button, and then we just run the rule manually or through the form. So let me give one more example here. And let's say our same company, has a linkage that's got a little bit different options. Instead of just 3 base options, it's always going to be based off of, they want a little more granular control. They want to say, hey, this is what the length is going to be, and then we want to turn on and off the fillet on our own. What we've got here is, I already set this one up. This is more just kind of an example for you guys, just run through. So in this case, I have it set up so that if the length is under a certain size, it's a certain thickness. If the length is over 4 inches, but less than 6, it can be a certain thickness. And if it's bigger than 6 inches, then it's this thickness. And then completely separately, I have a user parameter here called fillet on, which is that Boolean type, which means true, false. And if someone says yes for fillet on true, then it turns the fillet on or off. And I'll get back to this for you guys and show you a couple more things. We'll just see it in action. I've got this form here, and real simply,
Make it 6.
I'm going to make it 6. Nigel said so. And you can see it gets smaller.
But the thickness didn't change?
Right.
Because Eric screwed up his form?
I did not.
I found it.
No.
Go back into the form.
It's working as expected.
You have no...
It's working as expected.
You have no thickness for 6, Eric.
It's working as expected. 5 inches gets it smaller, and 3 inches smaller still.
Spectacular.
And the fillet, we can turn on and off at will. Let's say it's back to 10 inches.
And you can set upper and lower boundaries for this too. Like if you don't want it to ever be above 6 or maybe above 8, you can have it so that if someone inputs 10 there, it won't let them do it. It'll automatically make it whatever the top boundary is, right? If that's 8, it'll set it to 8.
Yeah. And so that's getting a little deeper into the logic of what you can do with these conditional statements.
Logic.
Right? Amazing. And actually, we have a productivity training for you Streamline customers next week.
Yep.
And if you are part of Streamline, definitely check that out if you're interested in this, because that's going to be a 4-hour version of this.
Yeah, if the word Vault Care rings a bell to you too,
that's
I know the word Streamline is kind of new, or that nomenclature is new. Yeah, you have access to that productivity training that's next week. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Eric is teaching that for 4 hours next week.
That's right. So we'll go way deeper into this.
Yeah, it'll be awesome. It'll be super fun.
I know some of you are still interested in that code that I brought up earlier, and I'm going to show one more little trick here. So under the rules, you guys have length as a value, but you don't have thickness. I came up with that, and you're saying, that's dumb. I'm using side 1. Why would you do this to me? What I can do here is I can go to the parameters, find thickness, and say, well, fine. I will change this to side 1. You ready, Nigel? Are you ready?
I'm ready.
It's now side 1 in the code. We didn't have to change it.
Yeah, that would suck.
Right? Yeah.
But that's like not the greatest practice in the world. So like just name your stuff right the first time. So the code doesn't have to save you by updating all of your parameters.
Yeah. But now you guys can, do this on your end.
You can get crazy. You can start linking like multiple parameters from other files into this one. And we can go over that in another AVA, right? If you needed to get parameters from a different part file, for example, bring them in here. You can link the parameters.
Yep. And you guys will notice this little and that we added in here. If you take a look at this operators drop down, you can kind of see some of the options we have there. We can also see, I'm using the less than, greater than, less than equal to, et cetera, et cetera. These are all ones you can drop in. They're fairly self-explanatory. And so, you can just, you don't need to know all of them. Just hit that down arrow and see which one you need.
Aha. Yeah, so for those of you who have used like MATLAB in the past to do like algorithm stuff, I know it was like not my favorite class when I took it, but it's starting to make a lot of sense now. I'm like, why do I need to do this? And then when I started getting into some of this iLogic stuff, it makes so much sense. If then statements, if else statements. it starts to make sense. It's logical.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay, last thing. So we've got these rules, but how do you use them? What's the point? Well, there's two ways we can do that. Let's go ahead and create a new rule here. And we're going to call this high AVA. We're going to go back to the snippet. We're going to go down to message box, show. The message is now going to be high AVA. And the title is going to be important to note. It's very important. We're going to save this. We're going to close this. We're actually, one more thing. We're going to suppress this. So this rule is not going to run on its own. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to go over to the form, edit the form, and check it out. Not only do we have parameters, we also have rules. We've got rules that are part of this, like sizing rules and high AVA, and that's what I want. I want this high AVA. So I'm going to drop it over here and check it out. You've got this button that pops up. Go ahead and click OK. And when I launch the form, there it is. It's beautiful, Nigel.
Yeah, and so that's how you would run the rule from a form like this if you wanted it to not automatically update. I know that sometimes people start getting into like full-blown assemblies and then update.
Yeah.
Updates will take minutes.
Yeah, so I've done that definitely. For let's say you have a very large rule, or a chain of rules that run, they take minutes to go, and you don't want it to always run every time a single parameter is changed while they're going through the form. You can just suppress those rules and then have a update button at the end, that starts running the rules.
And then it goes ding, and then you run through your rule and you go get a cup of coffee, you come back, and boom, your assembly is built.
Exactly. So again, if we change this value, the size changes, but it doesn't run this rule because it's suppressed. Let's see here. Let's take a look at some of the other ways you can run these rules. If we go back to the Manage tab and over to the iLogic section, we've got event triggers. And we're on the This Document tab. So we've got the rules we have here, which means I can have that high AVA rule run every time I save the document. Let's give that a try. It didn't actually save because it's already saved. I think I have to change things, Nigel.
It's true. Make it like purple or something.
Ooh. It's beautiful. I'm screwing things up, Nigel. Oh, let's see here. And I don't know. I'm doing it on the wrong thing. I've used this before, I promise. Let's try this. We're going to change the parameter. And it's not working. Oh, it's because it's a suppressed rule, Nigel. Why don't I think about these things?
It's true. If it wasn't suppressed, it would run.
All right. Well, anyway, this is where you can run it for, individual. Let's get rid of you. You can move things over, set them to run off of the individual ones.
Yep.
And you can actually bring this up real quick before we leave. There's these things called external rules. This can be something that's, maybe based off of something you've got on a shared network folder that everybody looks at, where, everybody has access to these rules. Maybe you want to always make, your parts this sweet denim color, and you can have a rule that's an external rule that just turns everything on your part into denim.
Yeah, you hydro dip all of your products in denim vinyl.
Yeah,
that's it right there.
Yep. So you can set that there, and then no matter what part you're creating or assembly, whatever,
they'll all be denim.
It's all ready for you. So in this case, these rules are all attached to this part, but these external rules, these are completely separate and will show up each one. So if I go to this other thing, you can see.
Yeah, you'll see
test deletes.
But if you go into just the regular rules for this particular linkage, you won't see the ones that Eric made for
That's right.
that other part file.
That's right. It's just this one. And again, on this one, see, this one has no rules, but it does have the external rule. All right. Well, that does it for this time. Nigel, we got any questions in here?
Yeah. So one of the most important things for AVA, I'd say probably the most important thing after learning all of this stuff, is to be able to answer your guys' questions. That's why we do it every week. We could just record this stuff and put it on our YouTube channel without questions, and it would be kind of sad. So, yeah, let's get to the Q&A section. I'll give everybody about 30 seconds to ask any more of those. In addition to that, there's a couple of things I want to note too that I know maybe Eric didn't have enough time for. Is in 2019, some of the stuff changed in iLogic, and you can add parameter, or you can name faces, you can name edges and stuff like that. Yeah, it's there.
It's true.
So if you right click any edge or face, or I think points like vertices too in 2019, you can assign names to them. And what this does is it adds a parameter for this. Yeah. And then if you go into parameters,
there they are.
Yep. I think that's there. No,
it's not in this part.
Oh, it's not in that part. It's in the other side. But yeah, you can name stuff. It makes it a lot easier to understand. Like, hey, if you wanted to make a rule that turned that face to, maybe you didn't want that one to be denim and you wanted that one to be gold, you could use Nigel's face and turn it gold.
As is tradition.
Who knew? Let's see. Let's take a look at some of these questions. Can I change a component size in an assembly with the drop-down menu?
Yes.
Yeah, certainly. You just start linking a bunch of different files together, and you can.
Yes.
Yeah, you can have all of this move in certain ways, not necessarily every way.
Yeah, so let's say you have an assembly and you have, it's made up of multiple parts. In the assembly, you can still change the name of the parts.
Yep.
Anything else on there?
There's a couple of things too. Just a couple of notes from a couple of people here in regards to just other ways to do it. And that's the really cool thing is we got a lot of comments like, hey, you could also do it this way or this way or this way. That's the really cool thing about iLogic and design automation in general, or in just even like 3D modeling in general. There's hundreds of ways to get to your final destination, right? Not everyone's going to start out with the same sort of sketch. Not everyone's going to start by naming the same parameters in a certain way. There's so many ways to get to the same end result. And part of what we're doing is we're trying to make it so that you really don't have to think about it sometimes, and it just happens. So let's take a look. Let's see. Baron used to use Python to automate some AutoCAD tasks, probably list routines and stuff. Would I be able to do that in iLogic, and how so? I wouldn't use Python. So the way to automate some certain tasks in here, once you get out of the realm of iLogic, is to start doing things in VB.
Well, okay. iLogic is technically VB.net.
Yeah.
There is also still, you might be used to this VBA editor, slightly different language, slightly different way to approach what's going on. And then you can also, outside of Inventor, create add-ins or just separate programs that talk to Inventor.
Yeah, I would use the VB editor.
Yeah.
To do the stuff you were doing in Python and Inventor if you wanted to start moving that way.
But it's not in Python, it's VBA.
Yeah, so the language is completely different. Let's see here. What else do we got? I think that's just about everything for questions. Again, I'd just like to thank everybody for being here today. Eric as well. Thanks for putting this on. Hopefully everybody learned a lot. I know that iLogic, there's coding in general, right, for our design automation, there's a stigma that it is super difficult. Hopefully today we kind of negated that. We showed you look, it's really easy. You're already doing a lot of this stuff today. It's a simple change of workflow, especially for the parameter stuff. And that's where I really, really want to emphasize naming your parameters.
Yes.
And making it just so easy to do stuff in the future. Especially it's one thing to name them, right? It's another thing to name them properly. Give them descriptive names, right? Don't just this is, I know Eric used the word length a lot, but if you can get a little bit more descriptive in length and be this is, total length, or this is the whole length, stuff like that. Get a little bit more specific, and it'll save you a ton of time in the future. I know that diagnosing code and some stuff is not the most exciting thing in the world to do, but it's a lot easier to do it when all the names are built correctly.
Yeah.
So again, I'd like to thank you all for being here today. Next week, stay tuned. I'm going to be doing a shape generator webcast for AVA. And hopefully, those of you who don't know what that is, learn what that is. You'll see that email coming out next week. It's going to be me personally doing it. So it's going to be really exciting.
Yeah.
We're probably going to use a model. I don't know. I'll build something really cool for it. I have some samples, but I want to make something cool. So last question too from John. What about using iLogic in drawings for tables and such? You can use iLogic for drawings.
Yep.
That's like when you start getting a little crazy. When you start automating dimensions and stuff.
Oh yeah.
It's more complex than this.
A little bit.
Balloons and stuff pretty easy. So if you want to talk about it, John, let us know and we can talk to you about that stuff moving forward. So thanks again, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you again next week, same time, same place. Maybe Eric will be downstairs this time and not in the AVA room.
Who knows?
Awesome. So thanks, everybody. We will see you then. Cheers.